What's going on, guys? My name is WOLFWILL and welcome finally to the very first concept of the Spyro-Verse concept series. This is a series that has been long awaited ever since I announced it back in January, and we're finally able to start this series officially. So I'm really excited to do this with you guys, and I'm sure you have been pretty excited about it as well. Now, the way that I'm going to tell this specifically is not going to be like your usual dot-to-dot, word-for-word type of story. I want to be a bit more creative with this and basically just try to picture the scenario into your minds in as little time as I possibly can, and still pretty detailed as it is, because I don't want to end up going forever with this concept, like 20-30 minutes long, for example. So that's why I'm going to try to cover as much as I can, pretty much in a very suitable amount of time. So I think without further ado, let's get right into the concept. So as you guys can see by the title, this is called The Purple Dragon. So it's going to be a Spyro-centered story, the first of his trilogy in the Spyro-Verse. But it's still going to be featuring other characters such as Cinder, Hunter, Sparks, and so forth. But the aim of the story is going more towards Spyro's character and the type of dragon that he wants to end up growing up to be. So basically, the way that I could see this opening up is a recap of the final confrontation in Dawn of the Dragon. So this is where Spyro and Cinder go head-to-head with Malifaux over the Earth's core, and then eventually down into the Earth's core, whilst we get a couple of new perspectives in there as well, including seeing Hunter and Sparks help to round up civilians to get them into the underground city, being the ruins of WOLFWILL as instructed during the scene where Spyro and Cinder went with Ignitus through to the Burned Lands. However, prior to seeing Spyro and Cinder go face to face with Malifaux on the screen, we'll be hearing a couple of voices or so from throughout the Legend of Spyro trilogy playing in the background, sort of building up the moment, kind of in a slow motion style, and then it basically goes back to normal speed. Everything from this point literally is as we saw in Dawn of the Dragon, and it ends up showing, of course, Spyro using all of his power to put the world back together, but of course, just before Cinder confesses her feelings towards Spyro, but it's not certain if Spyro had actually picked up on this. But as soon as the screen goes completely white, that is when the Spyro-Verse officially begins. So after the intro has played, the screen would basically go black, and the story essentially picks up about 2 months after the events of Dawn of the Dragon. Now, during this period, we're going to find that Spyro and Cinder are going to be hiding in Avalar for the time being, just so they could both recover and just sort of have a moment to forget about their responsibilities and just be themselves. Now, it is completely obvious that the two of them are interested in one another. However, no official moves actually get made as of yet. Of course, Cinder knows what she said, but she isn't sure if Spyro had actually heard her say those words during Dawn of the Dragon. So that's why no moves are made just yet, but audiences are going to be able to pick up on their interests straight away. Now, of course, at the same time, they will pretty much reflect on what's happened in their lives, and will sort of try to figure out where they want to go from here, because Malifaux is obviously gone, the world's put back together, they're not entirely sure what to do just yet. But of course, that's where we get to WOLFWILL, where we find Hunter, Sparks, and the Guardians, being Volteer, Cyril, and Terrador, helping the civilians of Dragon City to rebuild what was in ruin during the war back in Dawn of the Dragon. Now, what I'm thinking could happen with the Guardians is they decide that they want to come together with the rest of the Dragon Guardians from across the world, who we hadn't obviously seen prior to now, because well, obviously they were really far away, but the idea of it is they all come together and are basically wanting to discuss what they could do to ensure that the world is under its protection with peace and prosperity and obviously no war. So kind of like a new world order basically. And amongst the Guardians is going to be Red. Now you guys know Red from Spyro: A Hero's Tale, in which I've decided to bring Red in and basically be canon in the Legend of Spyro universe as a fellow Guardian. So basically, everyone's trying to figure out what to do from here. Of course, Terrador's sort of the one in charge, so it's kind of like a world organization type of thing where you've got all the leaders from different countries. It's kind of like that in a way, sort of a little bit in a mess at the moment. Red, obviously, he has certain beliefs that Malifaux once had himself and believes that they should revert back to some of the old ways where there was a balance between the light and dark with magic. However, Terrador doesn't exactly agree with this because obviously if they look back at what happened with Malifaux, that led to ultimate chaos, literally. So they obviously don't want to go down that road again, which only infuriates Red a little bit more. However, he's not exactly a villain at this point. He's just more conflicted because no one seems to be really listening to him. Now, Hunter and Sparks at this point, they're pretty close to one another as really good friends, and obviously they're wondering what's happened with Spyro and Cinder, but obviously they don't believe that they're dead. They know that they would have survived, especially with previous events, and Sparks, knowing from experience, guarantees that they're still out there. So eventually, Hunter and Sparks would discuss with Terrador, Voltaire, and Cyril about what's happened with Spyro and Cinder, like where they could be, what they might be doing, and what will eventually happen. Because obviously, Hunter has got his own involvement in this new world order, especially since Chief Prowess and some of the other cheaters of Avalar did literally run into the battlefield in Dawn of the Dragon during the war. So Hunter has got no idea what has happened with his tribe at this point in time. He hasn't gone back to Avalar since. So at this point, he could potentially be one of the last few cheaters of his tribe. Now, if we go back to what's been happening with Spyro and Cinder, of course, Spyro is recovering like a lot, especially since he did literally use all of his power to bring the world back together. But that doesn't mean he's being able to escape certain visions. So there will be a couple of nights where Spyro will begin to have visions and wake up in the middle of the night stressed and a little bit scared in a way, because he doesn't know what these mean, but it sort of resembles Dark Spyro in some sense. So of course, a little bit later in the trilogy, I'd want to be able to sort of dive into more of Dark Spyro, and I think you guys would really love to see that. So it wouldn't be something for now, but it'll be something to build up towards. Eventually, Cinder is going to pick up on Spyro's stress with these visions, and Spyro obviously is going to inform Cinder of what's been happening and try to help out as best as she can. And then eventually, they come to an agreement that they gotta go back to Warfane, and maybe the Guardians can help them figure out what's going on, but also because they haven't seen them since the war ended. So it'd be a nice sort of reunion, especially to see Sparks and Hunter again as well. Now, as we know, the travel from Avalar to Dragon City does take quite a bit of time, but the shortest route would be taking the underground passage that Spyro, Cinder, Sparks, and Hunter once took during Dawn of the Dragon. So that is basically the passage that Spyro and Cinder will take once again to get to Warfane. Now, obviously the duration of this journey will be quite a bit of time, but they will be a little bit faster than they were last time, so a little bit of an advantage there. But basically, when they get back to Warfane, they're going to be walking through the streets, and civilians are going to come out and notice that they've returned, and obviously word of their return is going to spread like wildfire. And obviously the Guardians are going to find out, including Sparks and Hunter, who will come out and basically greet their return. And this is where obviously reunion happens. So Sparks gets to catch up with the two dragons once again, same as Hunter, the Guardians, and of course this is also a moment where they share their deepest regards for the loss of Ignitus, because Ignitus was obviously with Spyro and Cinder when he was able to help them get through the burned lands, well, specifically the big wall of fire, and had sacrificed his life so that they could get through. Of course, in celebration of their return, the Guardians basically come to an agreement that they've got to hold a celebration, which kind of has been in the making of, like, planning for quite a bit now, because obviously they didn't know when they were going to return, but they were going to be prepared for it either way. So of course, later that evening would be where the celebrations would be held in the market square, town square, pretty much all over the city, and it's where everyone's going to start catching up with one another again. Hunter will be able to discuss with Spyro on some things in regards to what's happening with the New World Order, especially with what's sort of happening with Red, because obviously prior to this, we're going to obviously see that the Guardians sort of get together again, and they're having like some sort of a supper before the celebration where Red would try to convince Pterodor once again about what should happen, and of course Pterodor is going to deny this offer, and a fight almost breaks out, but then is immediately stops before it happens. Obviously, Red shares his apologies and basically walks out back to his chambers, and this is where he meets a hooded figure for the first time. This hooded figure was actually in the crowd previously in the day or the day before, during Spyro and Cinder's travel to the city, where all the dragons come together to announce a new world order is being formed. The hooded figure would actually be revealed to be the Stranger, who, if you guys know from the previous Spyro games, is the one responsible for manipulating Red in the first place to become a villain. So I thought it'd be a good idea to sort of bring the Stranger into this, just to make it flow with what's happening. And of course, he's kind of like a angry protester, civilian type of thing, where he's basically protesting against what Pterodor thinks is best for the world instead of what should happen, because obviously the Stranger was very much aware of what Malifaux once believed in and knew that it actually would have worked, except Ignitus and the others prevented it from happening. And Red kind of sees this as a chance for him to somehow convince Pterodor that this is the way to go. But of course, as I've mentioned before, it pretty much gets turned down later on again. And yeah. So Red and the Stranger will talk to one another and basically exchange their beliefs, because the Stranger completely understands what Red is talking about and knows that there is a way that this could work, but they got to figure it out. But this is also where the Stranger starts to manipulate Red by even showing him things that Malifaux has done that the Guardians had never actually explained. And this only helps to motivate Red more to drive his motive and just go for it, basically. Now, if we go back to the celebrations, obviously Cinder is eventually going to come up and see Spyro. Hunter will go down and just basically hang with the others. And this is where Spyro and Cinder sort of get a moment together again. A little bit awkward between the two because they don't exactly know what to say, but then they talk about how it's good to see everyone else again and sort of continue with their other conversation on what could perhaps happen. But then of course, now that they know that there's a new world order being formed, they sort of try to figure out what's going to happen from there with the new order. But this is also where Spyro tries his best to see if he could actually admit his feelings to Cinder. But before he could actually do it, Sparks obviously then intrudes and says that the two of them have got to come down because the Guardians want them to basically present themselves to everybody else. So this is where Spyro and Cinder sort of get to meet some of the other Guardians, and then they also get to meet Red. And Spyro doesn't exactly notice it at first, but he can kind of understand what Red is talking about. But this is what sort of makes Spyro a little suspicious, especially because he sort of gets a little bit of deja vu in this moment where he realizes Red may have been a part of his vision that he saw. Now, eventually, Spyro is going to have a small discussion with Pterodor because Pterodor can even pick up on what Spyro sort of sensed and is doing his best to try and help understand what this could mean, but it's still not very clear. Now, after he has the discussion with Red, Cinder kind of actually picks up a little bit on this and can realize that maybe there's something to deal with Red that might happen, because Spyro could see that there's a little bit of Malifaux's belief and influence on Red. And it's also because of the stranger that this has happened in the first place. So basically, the stranger may have had some involvement in associating with Malifaux in the first place. And that's why the stranger seems to know a lot about his beliefs, what he did, and has used this to help motivate Red into basically turning to become a bad guy. Now, at some point a little bit later again, during the celebration, Red is going to end up confronting Pterodor once again, but this time he's not playing games. This is basically the moment where Red is going to snap, especially since there are other Guardians around who basically are looking at him with frustrated looks. And yeah, so Red basically attacks Pterodor, starts a fight. Obviously, Spyro and Cinder are going to see this, including Hunter and Sparks, and this is where shit gets real. Now, as we know, Red actually does carry a sorcerer's staff, and this is what he is going to use to help attack Pterodor and the other Guardians as well. And at the same time, Spyro is going to tell Hunter to basically help get the civilians away from the fight, and Cinder helps to do the same. At the same time, Spyro is going to do what he can to protect the Guardians from Red, who then eventually starts attacking him. So it's going to get a little intense, and the two start fighting in the town square. There's basically going to be a mix of conversation and fighting, because this is Red trying to convince Spyro to see if he could listen rather than the Guardians themselves, seeing as Spyro is the Purple Dragon and happens to be the next Purple Dragon after Malifaux. Obviously, Spyro is not going to be entirely on board, and he is going to be a little conflicted himself because he's been trying to find out what his true destiny is. Rather than being told what his destiny should be, he wants to write his own. So at this point as well, he wants to be able to try and help Red to stop what he's doing, because he doesn't want to see anyone else go down the same path Malifaux did, because they all saw what happened. The world was literally being torn apart as it was. So this has given Spyro some fear, which is what I sort of explained before when he had his visions, and this is what he is trying to prevent. So, of course, the two are going to continue to fight whilst Hunter, Cinder, Sparks, and the Guardians help to try and round up the civilians and get them to safety. But then, of course, this is where Cinder is going to come in and try to help Spyro as much as possible. Now, Cinder eventually at one point is going to get knocked out to the side, and this is sort of going to infuriate Spyro a little bit, which gets him a little bit angry, and this is where Red's tactic sort of is working, where he's sort of trying to draw Spyro more and more to his dark side. And even though it seems like it's working, eventually Spyro is going to realize that this is what he's trying to avoid in the first place, which is what I've been saying with the whole destiny situation. He is going to write his own story. Doesn't matter what any prophecy says, what the past has said about Malifaux or the Purple Dragon bloodline, basically. This is where Spyro will write his own story. And basically, he snaps out of it and basically continues to fight Red, but in a much calmer fashion and more controlled. Cinder is going to end up being a little wounded though, since she took a really bad hit to like a massive brick wall. So she is going to have a bit of an injured wing and an injured paw, but for the most part, she is okay. Hunter eventually is going to come in and basically help Cinder get to safety, but at the same time, he's gonna obviously protect her and fight off against basically Red, who then notices this and tries to attack them, but of course Spyro is going to help out too. So basically, this is a moment where Spyro and Hunter get to fight together side by side, which I think would be really cool to see. And eventually, Red gets defeated. With Red defeated, he basically gets rounded up by the Guardians, and of course they discuss what they're going to do with him. And eventually they come to the agreement that they're going to take Red away. Now, one thing I didn't mention was during the fight between Red and Spyro, which is obviously, it's going to be a lot more in-depth, but this is me trying to explain it in a more brief fashion for you guys. But basically, he's going to explain that what Spyro did to put the world back together may have started something that's a lot bigger than them. And what I mean by this is unleashing a new power or a new threat that could even be from a different reality. So this is where the multiverse theme could sort of be introduced. It's because of Spyro putting the world back together that a potential rift to other dimensions could be opened up. And this goes in depth more with what Red believed in, because Red had studied a lot of magic and the Stranger had also known about this stuff, and that's why the two of them were able to discuss about this. And obviously Stranger, using this to his advantage, was able to manipulate Red into just unleashing this chaos and to try and get Spyro to turn. Obviously, after Red is taken away to basically like a temporary prison cell or something, they wonder where the Stranger has gone, but obviously he's nowhere to be found. However, we do see him on a rooftop on this, like on a building or somewhere in the city still, and he basically disappears completely. But it won't be the last time that we do see him. At the same time, Spyro will obviously want to make sure that Cinder's okay, and once again, it's another very wholesome moment between the two dragons. And trust me guys, we are going to be diving into the relationship between these two characters further down the line, or closer, depending on how we go. But trust me, we are going to look at it. And there is a lot more to be told as well. So essentially, in the end, Spyro then gets to have a conversation with Pterodor about where he wants to go. Like, what is his place? What does he want to do? And Spyro explains that he knows that he can't escape being a hero, but that's not a bad thing. He wants to be able to do what is right and make Ignitus proud, because Ignitus was basically a father to Spyro. And he wants to do him proud and be the guardian that Ignitus knew Spyro was capable of being. And that's the whole theme of the first of his trilogy, which is basically Spyro truly finding out the type of dragon that he knows he wants to be, writing his own destiny. So you're probably wondering, did I plan a post-credit scene concept for the Purple Dragon? Well, yeah, I did. So basically, this would be set a short bit after what's happened, where we basically find Spyro with Cyril and Hunter looking at the map of the world basically and some other scriptures. They're basically discussing that they are going to need more backup, basically looking for more heroes. And Cyril happens to find some scriptures from some of the Guardians who recently arrived in the whole World Order meeting situation, where when it's opened, it reveals a scripture-like image of both Flame and Ember. Basically revealing that Flame and Ember are going to be making their debut in the Spyro cinematic universe. And of course with this is going to lead to future potential storylines and of course team-ups, because we have so much more to look at. And as we know, the world is only getting bigger and bigger. So there you go. This is basically just an explanation, sort of what could happen to set up the Spyro-Verse as a whole. So basically, Spyro ends up coming back to being the hero that he knows that he has to be, but he wants to do it his way. So this is setting up the future of what's going to happen, because of course we are going to be introducing more characters as we go along, set up more villains and so forth, and the whole multiverse theme is going to come in. And of course, the Stranger, we know, is going to have a bit more involvement as well, so you'll expect to see a lot more of him here and there. And essentially at the end, the world, the new world order pretty much is in formation, and Spyro is going to be a part of that too. But Spyro will also ensure that the world is going to be safe. But with this, I just want to say as well that this is actually the first time I have tackled something as big as this, because I'm not much of a storyteller myself, but I've had interests in concepts for a while, and I just thought this would be something good that I could work on. And of course, I want to do this with you guys. So if you guys have got anything you want to suggest or even add to say what happens here or possibly in future, you can always let me know down below in the comments, because I am open to suggestions and I want to be able to write this with you guys. But what did you guys think? Did I explain it okay enough for you guys? Because like I said, this is sort of the first time I'm tackling something this big, but I think it sounds pretty good to me, at least, just for like a brief explanation kind of. But yeah, so with that though, thank you guys so much for watching, and it has been a privilege to finally launch this series, because I've been looking forward to this for a while, and there are going to be so many more stories that we can tell. I already have a much better idea of how I want to tackle Hunter's trilogy specifically, which his first one is going to be more of a prequel to the Legend of Spyro trilogy, so just keep that one in mind, guys. But yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun, and I hope you guys have found this to be quite fun also. And yeah, so until next time, I hope you guys have a great day or a great night.